Good morning and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Leah and this is True Crime on Tuesdays. This is a day where I kind of go over a case that I've been looking at or that have gotten my attention. Currently, I have been going through the ones that have anything to do with the American Horror Stories. There are some that are even deeper into the American Horror Story series that are just brushed over. And yeah, I'll be covering those too. This one, as you can see by the title, you've probably heard of this one. And a lot of people wanted to hear about him, along with my previous one, which was John Wayne Gacy. This one's going to be a long one because there's a whole lot of stuff that you had to delve into. And I would go to one thing and then I'd be like, oh wait, no, I got to find out more about this, and then over here about this. Now I have a lot more information than what I'm going to be sharing because some of it is just really too graphic. And also, I'm not going to be talking about any of the names of the victims as for requested privacy from the family of the victims. They were all male. Victims. Another warning coming at you is that this case includes necrophilia, murder, obviously, a few things that have to do with children and animals, but again, with those types of things, I have a tendency to just kind of brush over. Because I don't like to go into details over deep things like that. There will also be rape. Discussion of rape in this. So if any of these are going to be a trigger for you, please take care of your mental health first. Don't worry about the video. You can always catch me on a different video. But for now, we're going to go ahead and move in to the video. This one's going to be a long one. This gentleman at 30 or so years old was a handsome, intelligent, and charismatic person. But what lied beneath was a cold-hearted killer that a small surgery at 4 years old could have possibly changed his life and his direction forever. We are talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. I know you guys have heard about him. Even people who are way, 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 way younger than me have heard about him. He even has a cult following. Look, I don't understand y'all who be following him or any serial killers. I put this out there because I do find it interesting, but I find it more interesting because I want to know how they think. But that's about it. I don't have a fascination with them. Today for the eyebrows, we're going to be using Anastasia Beverly Hills, her brow kit. Comes with a lot of little goodies, but I absolutely love this kit. I've just used it forever. Jeffrey was born Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, May 21st, 1960. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's why a lot of people, when they think of Milwaukee, they think of him. Me, I personally think of the beer, even though I don't drink. He was the first of two sons to a couple. The father's name was Lionel Herbert Dahmer, and he was a chemistry student at Marquette University. And later he became a research chemist. So this guy was smart, right? So it'd be natural that he would pass that down to Jeffrey. His mom was a stay-at-home mama for the most part, but she also was a teletype machine instructor. And I think she suffered from depression because she had multiple attempts at suicide, and that's what is making me make that assumption. I tried to look into it, and there was nothing really that said that she had depression. But I don't really know if back then if they actually, diagnosed it. But she did try to commit suicide a few times. And his mother's name was Joyce Annette Dahmer. Now, since then, I don't know about the mom, but I know that the dad changed his name. He just doesn't want to have anything to do with it, so don't go looking up his name now because, when people change their name, usually they're trying to just get away from it. I don't really blame him. because this was heartbreaking to his dad, everything that happened and having to deal with it and knowing that that was his son that did this. So, you know, if you come across maybe his real name, just kind of leave him alone. I would leave his mom alone and his brother alone too, you know, just don't mess with them. He was described as an energetic and loving, outgoing, happy child until the age of 4, which when a double hernia surgery completely changed him. Which is interesting to me because, you know, we think about surgeries being quite routine, especially a double hernia surgery, even on a 4-year-old. I mean, my child had a surgery kind of similar that she had to have done, and she was like not even a year old when she had to have it done, and she's fine. So it's just sad, I think. But then again, medicine is different now than it was back then. But it makes me think that there was some type of adverse reaction with the anesthesia or any of the medications that were given to Jeffrey when he was a child, if it had this massive effect on him during, you know, just from one surgery, because they said it was a vast change and he became withdrawn and quiet, even so much as like saying he came off like subdued. And anybody who knows a 4-year-old, they are not subdued. A little while later, he ended up having a brother, a baby brother, and Jeffrey got to name him, and his name was David. And after that, the family kind of started moving around more. That also, to me, would have an effect on a child. Yeah, and even into his teen years, he started becoming more and more like withdrawn. He was like disengaged with everybody, tense even. Like, I could see that. I could totally see that, like being not just tense, but intense type of person. This is the Milani Precision Brow. I'm just going to use this to add in a little bit of detail. So I didn't get a chance to tell you right in the beginning, but the seasons that I took this from would be from Devil's Night on American Horror Stories Hotel, in which Jeffrey Dahmer was portrayed by an actor in the show. Which, interestingly enough, the host of it was James March, who was H.H. Holmes. I did another video on that. And he was portrayed by Evan Peters. So Evan Peters went on to do Jeffrey Dahmer, which is just labeled Dahmer, in the Netflix series, which was really whoa. So back to our story here. As Jeffrey aged, at about 14, he got interested in roadkill, necrophilia. Compulsions were there for this. Now that it doesn't mean that he, you know, went out and just did that yet. No, he did not, that we know of, commit his first murder yet. He was having a moment, okay? He was struggling. His parents would fight. Now, they weren't physically fighting, but like, you know, fighting. But they did have many altercations, which was very hard on Jeffrey. And to keep our brows in place, we're going to use the NYX brow glue. So, just a few short years later, his parents actually did decide to call it quits. And, you know, of course, this is hard on any child, especially into their teens. When you're young and you separate, I don't think it affects a child as much as when you're older, like in your teens. And by now he was pushing his graduation and all of this. Times in the life where you would be really excited with what your life is going to bring and very open-minded with all the just great things that you should be going for. And it's such a time in your life where there's just so much possibility. You know, you graduated and all of this stuff. For our eye primer today, we're going to use the Beauty Creations Color-Based Primer in Ballerina. I've used this before, but because we're going to be using some color, you really want to have a good base down so to make the colors pop. Just like if you're wearing really, really bright colors, sometimes you want to lay down like a light base or like a white base. Or if you want to flip-flop the colors, you can put down a black base and it will totally change, completely change the eye look. So right after, we bounce around from makeup to the actual topic. So with all of this, Jeffrey was, I would say, even more tense than he was before, right? So he's graduated, he's in his house, and his father had chosen to move out, okay? Which happens in a divorce, one of the parents usually move out. They don't usually stay in the same house. And that was a jarring change to Jeffrey as well. Now, after some time, his mother also got full custody of her son and Jeffrey's brother David, and so she just decided to move out as well, leaving the house to Jeffrey. And at 18 years old, unless you're like this hyper responsible 18-year-old, he left him there. They left him there, but his dad did not know that he was left there by himself, okay? Just so you know. His dad did not know that. His mom was like, I'm out. But his dad did not know that he was left there by himself. And his dad had actually taught him, this is like a little side note, his dad had actually taught him, they were like at dinner one time, and he was eating some wings or something, and that he was like, Dad, because his dad's like, this chemist, how could I preserve this bone if I wanted to preserve it? So unwittingly, his dad showed him how to do this, which comes in later to play. And, his dad didn't know. I feel so bad for his dad. His dad had no idea that anything that he was going to show his son would transpire such heinous crimes. So Jeffrey had the house to himself. And he's, just enjoying his life, having the house to himself. And this was about 1978. He was, 18 years old, like I said before. So he's just enjoying having life. Like, nobody to hold him down, nobody to hold him back. The holding him back is what the problem was. For our eyes and face, we're actually going to be using my Ofra palettes. They are this is a few of them. This is not all of my Ofra palettes, but I do really love these. And yeah, so this is what we're using for our face and eyes today. Because I really think that, or most people think that the final straw was his parents divorcing and then moving out. Both parents moving out, the dad, then the mom, and leaving him alone. And this kind of just was like the straw that broke the camel's back, or what it appeared to be, to let him dive into the darker side of him. Jeffrey by far was not an ugly 18-year-old. He was kind of like dorky cute, if you could kind of get that vibe. If you look up pictures of him younger, it's kind of like that's how he looked. That's the only way I can describe it. And so it wouldn't be very hard for him to lure in somebody, because he'd be like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Or maybe not as smooth, but he would lure them in, and it doesn't seem like it'd be really a trouble for him. Upon his graduation, we've already covered this. He's graduated. Okay, great. Good job, Jeff. Well, he sees a hitchhiker. And this hitchhiker's around the same age as him, maybe a smidgy poo older, but still probably in the 18, 19-year-old range. And Jeffrey was like, ooh, he wanted to hang out. So he talks to him about some beer, and he's like, hey, would you like to come over to my house for some beer? Remember, Jeffrey's living alone. He's got the house to himself. He's by himself. Well, he invited over this young hitchhiker, and they proceeded to get drunk. They were just kind of enjoying each other's company. And then the hitchhiker, as it grew later and later, he was like, I'm ready to leave now. Can you take me back to my spot that I was walking at? And Jeffrey, well, he was pretty upset over this. He didn't want him to leave. I think he just wanted company because, his parents left, and then he just was all alone. So he was just really not happy about this. And so much so that he decided to strike the victim with it's a dumbbell, that you like lift weights with. And he smacked the tarnations out of him with it. And once he was kind of like all loopy, he took the bar of the dumbbell, like that little gap part, and he actually strangled him with it. Not very nice, Jeff. That was not very nice. You had a friend that was coming over to hang out. Who knows if he would have come back or not, but you didn't need to go all there. Little excessive. Little bit of excessiveness there. But, so that's what he did. He strangled him, and this was his first kill. And he was stoked. Like, this was amazing for him. He felt like there was something in him that had been satisfied. After the actual act was done, he dismembered him, put it in little plastic bags, but before he finished, like, he had dismembered it, but when it was dismembered and like laying on the table, I can kind of like see like it laying like on a table or something. And so then Jeffrey was super aroused by this, and he actually masturbated over the body or the torso of it, and then put them all, which I don't understand because that's DNA. So you don't want to leave that kind of stuff at a crime scene. And then buried him around the family home, which later on I'm not really sure why he decided to do this, but later on he did actually dig up the body again, and he actually dug it up again and then like beat it more with like a sledgehammer because it was down to being decomposed into like bones and maybe a few other bits. But he beat it up and then took it down to a local woodland ravine area and sprinkled it the rest of the way. But yeah, apparently what he did before, he didn't feel that was sufficient enough. So it seemed like that this had really satisfied Jeffrey, at least for a little while, because Mr. Jeffrey didn't kill for some time. But that's also because he was a bit preoccupied. His dad had come home to find out that Jeffrey was, well, living by himself. He wanted him to go to college, make something of himself. And he sent him to college. It was paid for. Jeffrey just had to go. And he went to Ohio State University. Yeah, that was a big shocker to me. I was like, what? My husband went there. Different time though. Different. They're like a lot of years apart. But anyways, that was like really a shocker to me for some reason. I guess because it kind of hits home. But yeah, so he did not do well, which is kind of surprising to me because I think that Jeffrey was probably much smarter than he let on. Just like playing games, because you have to kind of be smart to get away with things for a while. But he totally like went to this school, and I don't even think he had like a 1-point GPA. So he basically failed his only semester that he went. Not basically. He was just not interested in that. So his dad was like, you need to go do something with your life. You can't just sit around here. And so Milani setting spray. Jeffrey was just not feeling this. So he ended up being told that, hey, you need to get into the military. Once he got into the military, the army, he was actually deployed over to Germany. His drinking habit, yeah, he had one of those. He had a drinking habit. He likes some alcohol. He likes some alcohol a whole lot. Like way more than he should. It was not like a wine glass a day. It was like a lot, like a case of beer or two a day. So anyways, he got over to Germany and that only escalated. It just got worse from there, okay? Some people had said that Jeffrey had assaulted them. He was actually discharged in 1981. And though there were some murders that happened over there and in that vicinity during the time that Jeffrey was over there, they did not say that they could pin those on him, and they were never pinned on him. So from what we understand, Jeffrey did not take any more lives while he was in the actual military. After the military, different story. Today for primer, we're going to be using NYX's Plump Right Back. So he failed college, and then he gets discharged from the Army. Needless to say, his dad is pissed. Like, he's in about 21 now, and his dad's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life here? What's going on? You know? What's going on with you, Jeffrey? But Jeffrey was not even just getting started with all his stuff. When he was sent back to his dad in Ohio, he was actually arrested for disorderly conduct. But it usually means like you were really drunk, like drunk and disorderly conduct. You're drunk, you're misbehaving, things like that. That's what I'm guessing it was about because of the way it was phrased. This is the e.l.f. Halo Glow Liquid Filter, glow boosting for radiant skin. So we're just going to go ahead and, I've never used this before. See? Has a big old applicator. I love big old applicators and foundations. So once he was arrested for disorderly conduct, his dad was like, I can't deal with your butt no more. You need to go live with grandma. Maybe moving into a different area, he thought maybe Jeffrey would do better. Not so much. Not so much at all. Because when he got out to grandma's house, he decided to flash some teen boys and got arrested for indecent exposure. Yeah. He did that. That was the thing. And so it was like he was just not stopping. He was, no matter what they were doing, he was not slowing down. This was not going to be a thing that he was going to slow down on. So after he exposed himself to these two young teens, they actually accused him of masturbating in front of him. I don't know what it was with him masturbating in front of people or on things, but apparently he really liked this. Maybe he was proud of himself in that region. I don't know. But he did do that, and he was sentenced to 1 year probation. Yeah, they just gave him a probation. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. In November of 1987, this is when Jeffrey actually performed his second murder. Now, in his case, he actually confessed to a lot of, 16 murders. Yeah, that's how many he confessed to. And this is the Milani Conceal Perfect. And I'm also going to use a little bit of the Incognito Wet n Wild Concealer. I use multiple concealers usually. This victim was a 25-year-old man. And he was like, hey, let's go get drunk. Have some fun. And he had said that he had no real intention of murdering this man. But when he did wake up, have you ever heard of blacked out drunk? Well, that's what they got. They got straight up blacked out drunk. Or at least that's what Jeffrey did or said. He said basically he was drunk, he passed out, and when he woke up, his arm was covered in blood and the guy next to him was dead. This was unexpected. Or that's what Jeffrey said. This was unexpected. He had no plans of murdering this guy. It just happened. And that's why you don't get blacked out drunk, because you do stupid things. You're not in control of yourself, and that's just dumb. But you have to be able to prove it that you're blacked out drunk nowadays. So don't get any ideas if you watch my video thinking, oh, I could just say I was blacked out drunk. Nope, that's not an excuse, especially nowadays. They don't play that. This actual action happened at a hotel. So Jeffrey got a suitcase, and a large one. I have to say that because he stuffed this gentleman into the suitcase. It can't be a small one if you're going to put a body in there. And so he actually puts him in there, then takes him to Grandma's house. Off to Grandma's house we go. He just left the body there for a little minute. Okay, Grandma has no idea that this is going on, that her grandson has lost his ever-loving mind and he is doing some really naughty things. Because Grandma probably would have stepped in and said something. But it's good that she didn't know. It's better for her. You know, she probably died knowing that, oh, my grandson was good, you know, all this stuff. So we'll just go with that. After the gentleman was in the suitcase for like a hot minute, you know what I mean? Just a little bit. He was just like hanging out in there, dead. And Jeffrey goes down to the garage basement area and starts dismembering this man. And he gets aroused again and does his little masturbation thing over the corpse again. Why? Like, again, the DNA thing. I don't know. I don't understand how he thinks. So, he was getting his kicks off that way. For this portion of like cream contour and blush, we're going, because this is going to be a long video, so we're just doing it all. We're going to use the NYX Wonder Stick, and this is in the blush version, and then this is the highlight and contour NYX Wonder Stick. He got rid of the body, but he really wanted to hold on to this guy's head. So he did. He held on to his head for a little bit, but eventually discarded that as well. You know, he maybe he thought he was cute or something, but he did keep his head for erotic stimulation. So eventually he did get rid of the head, but he had kept it for a little bit just for his own enjoyment. Now during this time he was still living with Grandma, and Grandma still had no idea. He actually ended up doing 2 more kills at this point in time. One was of a 14-year-old Native American prostitute in 1987. He actually had just propositioned the young boy. Like, yeah, that 14-year-old prostitute should never be in the same sentence. 14 years old and prostitute. They just shouldn't be in the same sentence. But they are. And he actually propositioned the boy that if he would pose nude for him. Like, this was his thing. Like, would you pose nude for me? I want to take some pictures of you, you know. And he, you know, made a quick buck. You know, there was no kind of sexy time involved. So he was like, okay. The kid was like, okay. What Jeffrey actually preyed upon was just people that he did not think anybody was going to miss, which were criminals, prostitutes, what he would consider degenerates. And he ended up having sex with this 14-year-old and then took pictures of him in various suggestive poses, and then did his very typical thing that is his actual MO, strangled and murdered this young life. He did end up actually dismembering this young man as well, and he ended up keeping his skull. This one he did not get rid of, but he kept it. And Jeffrey was only just getting started. On March 24th of 1988, he abducted a 25-year-old man and strangled, took photos of, and obviously murdered, dismembered, taking pictures the whole time. Like, he took pictures during the entire like dismemberment process of his victims. It's like he really, really loved to do these pictures, and it's like he was documenting it for his own pleasure. With this one, he actually did have intercourse with when the person was deceased, and that's where the necrophilia comes into play. This is the, forgot to tell you, this is the Milani Conceal and Perfect setting powder. I used this before in another video as well. So at this point in time, Grandma is tired of Jeffrey's partying, or not really partying, but bringing home people and, you know, some smells that Jeffrey was bringing into the house. She just thought that was just his things, his belongings. She didn't know that it was anything other than his belongings. So Jeffrey moved into a hotel, not a hotel, he moved into an apartment. It was filled with criminals. And so Jeffrey was like, hey, this is like fantastic for me. This perfect spot, right? Like nobody's really going to raise eyebrows about this. At least that's what he's expected. You know, it wasn't exactly in the best part of town. And he was just like, I'm going to be able to do what I want to do without anybody dealing with me. It was a super cheap rental. I think it was like $300 to rent there, which, I mean, nowadays, could you really rent an apartment for $300? Probably not. I really have no idea where you could rent an apartment for $300. And he was just enjoying living his life. He had some fish, which he liked, you know, some tropical fish. Actually, you know, some people say they were tropical fish. Sometimes they would say they were fighting fish. I don't know. But he likes some fish, okay? At some point in time, during this short timeline of him moving out of his grandma's into his apartment, he was arrested for sexual exploitation of a 13-year-old and second-degree sexual assault. He did plead guilty to this, but he said that the kid seemed older. Okay, whatever. But that kid did live, so that's good. While awaiting his sentencing for the 13-year-old, Jeffrey was keeping busy. He ended up picking up another victim on March 25th, 1989. And I mean, you would think the cops would be watching him by now, but they're not. They're not. Because they didn't really have any red flags. Okay, that's a lie. They had red flags. I mean, this is what, his like second or third charge now? Anyways, the young man that he picked up was an aspiring model. So, of course, Jeffrey, without knowing that, he goes up to him and he's like, I'd love to take some pictures of you. You want to come back to my place, take some pictures? And this guy, this gentleman was an aspiring model, so he was like, heck yeah, because you never know who you're going to meet, you know, out on the street. You know, he might be somebody who is a photographer who's going to give him his big break. So he lured him in, he gave him a drink, he drugged him. He used like sleeping pills and stuff like that to drug these people. And, you know, you mix it up in a drink and give it to them. Like, you thirsty? Here you go, you know? And then he did his typical thing. He took pictures of him in different positions before, I think after he was unconscious. Once drugged, Jeffrey assaulted him, sodomized him, took pictures of the dismembering process to keep for further enjoyment purposes. This particular victim, he saved not only his head, but his genitalia. Apparently, he thought this guy was something to save both those parts. So he actually saved both of those for further reflection on enjoyment of whatever, you know, sexual enjoyment. Now it's time for him to go to the sentencing for the 13-year-old boy that he had sexually assaulted. And they talk about him being eloquent, and he argued his own case. And he ended up being in jail for, or put in jail for 1 year, sentenced to 1 year. And not just that, but he was they had like this day work release program where he could go work out of the jail cell and then during the day and then return at night. I can't with that, but whatever. He also got 5 years probation after that. But he got up, that's what I said, he wasn't a stupid guy. He got up and he said he argued his own case, and it's like, okay, if he argued his own case and they talk about how eloquently he spoke, how intelligent he sounded, how he knew his stuff, he could have used that for good, but no. Why did they always use it for bad? I don't understand. Before the day of his release on this, his dad did write a letter about saying that he needed his son to get evaluated by a psych, because he thought something was wrong with his son, and he was not wrong, but he was trying. He was trying, and that's why I just feel so bad, because his dad was just trying so hard to make sure everything went good and help his son, and it was just not working. Nobody was listening to him. He was actually released 2 months earlier than supposed to. He was supposed to serve a full year. He served 10 months and was released, which obviously didn't make his dad feel comfortable, but he tried. His dad did try. Instead of returning back to his apartment, he was actually moved back in with Grandma. And with Grandma, he was a good boy for that time. And so maybe by doing that, it saved some lives. I mean, one can only hope. Because this story has just gone downhill constantly. Once he was back in his own apartment, he was definitely back up to his old tricks again. And this is where his timeline starts progressing very quickly when it comes to murders. In 2 years, he racked up 13 more murders in 2 years. Like, he was like in a hurry for something, and I don't know what. In May 20th, he abducted a 33-year-old male and lured him, drugged him, assaulted him, took pictures of him, dismembered him, and discarded what he didn't want to keep. We're just going to be going through this slew of heinous crimes that he committed with this. This is the Dojo Cat collab with BH Cosmetics. One of my favorite liners. I hope they keep this on. So, April 7th, 1991, just by an unfortunate chance meeting, Heath ran into a 19-year-old. Jeffrey ran into a 19-year-old, and that 19-year-old became his next victim. He was lured to the apartment, drugged, assaulted, and dismembered. Many skulls were kept, and at this point in time, they did not have the information that I was looking for when I wanted to see every single one that was kept. But there were multiples. By now he had a cornucopia of like different skulls that he had kept for himself. Quick Milani setting spray. Not going to use the lashes today because I really want to put to the test and see how good the e.l.f. Lash and Roll Mascara Curling and Lifting Clean and Vegan Formula is, and the Narrow Flexible and the Lash Beats Defining and Lengthening Mascara. So I'm going to put these two together. I do like to mix and match mascaras to get whatever look I'm going for. So I figured I'd put these two together. And of course we're going to curl our lashes to start with all this. May 24th, 1991, he found another chance meeting at Kanmoni Heights. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, which I probably am, I'm really sorry. He picked up another gentleman, 31 years old, lured him back to the house, and had him pose for pictures, as well as not pose for pictures without him being drugged and assaulted, raped. These are definite, like, his MO, as you can see. Like, this is his thing that he likes to do. So this gentleman was raped and drugged, strangled, sexually assaulted, and dismembered. Parts of him were kept for future, I guess, future reference. Future enjoyment. Now you can imagine that in his apartment it was beginning to have a stench, because he had like a vat of acid that he would dissolve the bodies in. I said a vat, not like Joker Harley falling into a vat of acid type of vat, but a big pot of acid that he would dissolve the bodies in. Neighbors started complaining to, the person, the landlord, that they started complaining to the landlord about the smells, and Jeffrey would always make up a good excuse. He'd be like, oh, my fish died, or my freezer died, or whatever. Yeah, he had died right in the sentence, but he didn't have the full, real explanation of it. Think about it. If your freezer dies and you have meats in there, how bad that stinks. Yeah. The odor of death is like a smell beyond that. So it was permeating this place. And the landlord would call and try to get it solved, and Jeffrey would just be like, this happened and this happened. He always had a really good excuse for it. So, but it didn't seem to make the neighbors very happy. On May 27th, 1991, his neighbor happened to see a young man running around in the streets naked, and naturally called the police. Okay, finally, here we go. Yay, right? And somehow Jeffrey was able to explain to the police and get them to believe that was his 19-year-old lover, and that they were just having he was just out, he had drank too much, they were having some fun, and yeah, that's what it was. His lover was just out having a little too much to drink. And the cops did not really want to get into this type of domestic situation, so they were very much believing that this was the story and situation. If they had just gone in and done a basic search, they would have found things. No, they fixed him up, helped him back into Jeffrey's web, and this guy was just delirious. And it turns out that this particular victim was not 19 at all. He was actually 14. And of course, he was then killed and dismembered and disposed of. That is very unfortunate. The cops were right there. June 30th, 1991, Jeffrey met a 20-year-old African-American gentleman that had come for the Pride Parade. And he met him at a bus stop. And he was like, hey, you want to come back to my place? We'll take some photos, we'll drink, have some fun. And again, this particular gentleman was, again, drugged, assaulted, taken photos of, and dismembered, and taken more photos of. And by now I'm thinking, this apartment's got to be stinking. People are already, it was said that people were complaining about the smell, but can you imagine being in the actual smell of it? That's when you really start thinking wow, this must have, being all up in that snow. I would not have stayed. I'm sorry. If I had showed up at somebody's house and it had stunk, trust me when I say it would have stunk bad. So this gentleman fell to the hands of the heinous acts that Jeffrey had done, but Jeffrey was not done yet. In July 6th, 1991, Jeffrey met a very handsome 23-year-old Jewish Puerto Rican young man, and he thought he was something. Like, Jeffrey was like, ooh, this guy's really good looking. And so they were supposed to go on like a little weekend getaway. I don't know if they had been in a relationship, because I would think weekend getaway goes along with, hey, we're in a relationship, let's go have a lovely weekend getaway together. But they were supposed to have a weekend getaway, and this did not happen. This is where it gets a bit more twisted, because Jeffrey decided to do some experiments. Yes, he was ready to take on some experiments of his own. With this poor victim, he actually drilled a hole in his head once he was unconscious from the, drugging him, and then poured boiling water into his head. There was another instance in which he had drilled a hole in someone's head and actually poured some acid into it, thinking that would do something. Like he was trying to create something, maybe a submissive that would do whatever he wanted, because he just did not enjoy when lovers moved around. So he wanted them to just kind of lay still and just do his bidding. And maybe that's what he was trying to achieve with these experiment things. But I mean, I have no words, literally, when it comes to what to think about that. Because who thinks about something so horrific? Well, when he poured this boiling water into the guy's brain, it put him into a coma. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be good for him, and 2 days later, he actually died. And Jeffrey dismembered him and kept the parts he wanted and disposed of the ones he didn't. This is the Stila All Day Lip Liner. July 15th, 1991. An African-American gentleman at the age of 23 was unfortunately met with Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeff said that he was a photographer and he would like to have some pictures of this gentleman because he was attractive, and like all of these guys were attractive, and he was like, I mean, it seems like Jeffrey had a type. This gentleman that he had approached was an aspiring bodybuilder, and it just happened to ping, okay, yeah, please take some pictures of me. Maybe he can get into a magazine, again, along with the aspiring model. You don't know who you're going to meet on the road, so maybe this was his big break. Sure, he was like, yeah, let's go take these pictures. Sadly, it didn't work out that way. They weren't going to be the pictures he wanted. He then was lured to Jeffrey's apartment, drugged, strangled, decapitated, and some sexual assault happened. And then he was dismembered, and what the parts that Jeffrey did not want to keep, he got rid of or started disposing of in his Dungeness vats and things. On July 19th, 1991, yes, we're still going. I'm trying to get through these for you. A 25-year-old unfortunately came into contact with Jeffrey Dahmer, and this was his 17th victim. He was leaving a job interview that he had gone to. He was trying to go out and get some money. He was trying to go out and get a job and make some money. Maybe this is a better job than he had before. Maybe it was a new job. Maybe this was going to be a new start to his life, and he could bring his family over. Well, he was offered $50 to pose nude for Jeffrey, and once again, this victim was drugged, and they did not say if he was assaulted or not, but he was strangled, dismembered, but Jeffrey did keep his torso and his skull as memorabilia from his acts. On July 22nd of 1991, yes, we're still in 91. This literally, over these past 2 years, he just racked up a 14 body count. you know, he had already killed 3, but in 2 years he killed 14. That, talk about acceleration in what he was doing. I mean, he went a while, 1978 to like 1989, and killed 3. Now, he had other things that he had done, but now we're on to his 17th victim, and now we're moving into another person. On July 22nd of 1991, Jeffrey went into a bar with the intent of getting another victim. He met a few guys, and one of them was a good-looking African-American gentleman at the age of 32. He agreed to come home with Jeffrey to have some drinks, and they were all on the same page. They were both on the same page as to what they were interested in happening. When the gentleman got there, he was given a drink, of course, with some, with some sleeping pills in it. This is Stila's liquid lipstick. They're some of my favorites. And so they get to talking, and the guy is looking around, and he was given a drink, and I don't know if Jeffrey had run out of the drinks or the pills that he was using, or this guy had a high tolerance, but he was only loopy. He wasn't really drugged to where he would be unconscious, but he was loopy enough to have handcuffs put on him and him not be really aware of what was going on. He was basically you know, they were going to take some pictures, have some sexy time, and then hang out, right? Might have been the chance for a beautiful relationship, right? So he was just giving it a chance. But this 32-year-old started getting a creepy feeling, and the place smelled really, really bad, which you can understand. Jeffrey tried to blow it off and say that it was like, oh, I had some meat that was messed up, or fish died. You know, the very same thing that he would tell the landlord, he would tell this gentleman to try to bring him comfort and make him want to stay. This guy ended up getting very uncomfortable, and him and Jeffrey had a scuffle, and he actually got loose and started running down the road to get the attention of whoever he could get the attention of. He did actually end up getting the attention of 2 Milwaukee police officers, thankfully, and he was like, look, this is what happened, this is what was going on, and this guy did this to me. And so the Milwaukee police officers did not have the key to those handcuffs, so they actually went back to the apartment to talk to Jeffrey about this. Because this is you're drugging someone. This is an assault against someone. And assault and battery against someone. And this gentleman also talked about having a knife being held to his throat. And when they were there, getting the keys from Jeffrey, because Jeffrey was not really keen on having the police there for obvious reasons. He ended up pulling him. They're like, do you have the keys to these handcuffs, basically? And he's like, yeah, sure, I do, right here. We were just hanging out. I was just goofing around. And this guy's like freaking out. He's like, no, we weren't. This is not what I signed up for, kind of thing. And they ended up getting the keys to release the gentleman, which, this is what unraveled, really. This guy, it really stopped Jeffrey. And so he said exactly where the knife was. He said where, and Jeffrey told him where the keys were. The officers went into the room and retrieved the keys, and there was a drawer open that had the Polaroids. And he said, oh, those are fake, or those are just like my Polaroids. Those are just kind of like, basically trying to shrug it off. I wasn't there. So I don't really know the extent of the conversation, but the police officer started looking through these Polaroids and probably realized, oh crap, these are real. And they went to arrest Jeffrey and ended up having to tackle Jeffrey to the ground, and ended up arresting him. The gentleman was not further harmed. The potential victim was not further harmed, and Jeffrey was taken to jail. And as they continued, they began getting out more and more things out of Jeffrey's house. The vats that had like 3 to 4 torsos in it, body parts. There was like 4. There was 1 head, severed head in the refrigerator. There was like 3 in the freezer. There was 2 hearts. Multiple different things. Also on some of the cutlery, it had human DNA, giving them the reason to believe that he had eaten some of his victims, parts of them or something, because of the DNA and where it was on the utensils and things like that. There was 1 set of male genitalia. Was 1 full like skeletal remain, like a whole full like set, big full set, you know, feet, toes, phalanges, everything. There were I think I already said this, but there were torsos that were dissolving in the acid. The male genitalia was preserved in like acetone, I believe. Once he was arrested, needless to say, as I told you, the evidence against him was stacked so highly that there was no really way for him to get out of this. There was a high amount of racial tension during this trial for obvious reasons. This was a white male who had actually assaulted and murdered 17 people of different nationalities, and they were predominantly African American. They had heavy security and also an 8-foot barrier that was bulletproof between Jeffrey and the actual group of people that were there. Danielle, Jeffrey's father, who had been called and informed of everything, was at the trial every day. At first, Jeffrey did plead guilty to 16 of the murders. I don't know why he didn't plead guilty to the 17th. Maybe he forgot. They tried to prove insanity. That's like the go-to plea. He must be insane. Yeah, he's obviously messed up in the head if he's going to go out and do this. But did he knowingly do this? Apparently they realized that he knowingly went out and did this and planned this. So there went the insane plea out the window again, just like with John Wayne Gacy. February 15th of 1992, the jury only deliberated for 10 hours, came back with a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, and a 16th was added later on. It said that he adjusted to prison life very well, but that was because he was kept in like basically solitary confinement or away from general population because of such high racial tension because of his victims, and they kept him away, which they should have just thrown his butt in general pop and just been like, here you go, have fun with that. But I digress. He ended up he spoke to the board or whoever and got himself to be put into general population, in which he was very antagonistic with his making body parts out of food and make it look like severed body parts, which made a lot of the other prisoners uncomfortable, even though they were in prison for other reasons. But there was a particular situation where him and 2 other prisoners were supposed to go in and clean like the staff like locker room area, bathroom, like gym kind of situation. And one of them was Jeffrey's friend, and this other one was just put with them to go clean. So when he went in to clean, his friend and him started kind of antagonizing this other prisoner more and more and more. And the prisoner was already on edge because he did not like what Jeffrey had done to his victims and who his victims were. And he also did not like that he was being antagonized and that Jeffrey was trying to basically run the prison by antagonizing people with like severed body parts and just making people feel generally uncomfortable. And so what he did was he grabbed a bar from the weight room and ended up beating the tarnations out of Jeffrey and the other inmate that was with them. And the inmate Jeffrey was found completely bludgeoned. It looked like his face had been smashed against the wall as well. and he actually was pronounced dead there, whereas the other prisoner was pronounced dead a couple days later. But they did try to get them help, but it was obviously not, they didn't have enough time. It was already, the damage had been done. So he actually was only in jail he didn't make it 2 years, and he was murdered. I mean, that's the story of Jeffrey Dahmer from beginning to end. The guy who did murder Jeffrey and the other inmate, he had explained the reason why he did it, and it was the reasons that I gave you, that Jeffrey was antagonistic. He was pushing basically the severed body parts onto other people that he had made, making them feel uncomfortable, and everything that Jeffrey had done in his killing sprees just did not sit well with this particular prisoner, and so he handled it. If you guys have any comments, I love hearing from you guys. This was a long one, and I'm going to try in editing to kind of like shift it down a little bit shorter, because right now we're at 1 hour and 45 minutes that I've been sitting here talking to this. Hopefully I can squeeze it down shorter for you guys without leaving any parts out that are really important. I thank you guys for watching always. This is meant no disrespect to anyone involved in this case, including the officers and the medical personnel and the victims' families and the victims themselves and any of those people. Anybody involved in this, there's no disrespect meant to it. This is for entertainment purposes. It was a very lengthy case and a deeply disturbing case, but I think honestly all of them are very deeply disturbing. I thank you guys for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next Tuesday. You guys have a fantastic day. See you next time.